ASBAS program. This program has been developed by the Australian government, and RDA Brisbane is who I'm engaged with, as well as Business Station. So up through ASBAS, you can access up to 24 hours of highly subsidised advisory sessions with a wide range of industry experts that you'll find through the website. So just letting everybody know that we're not, I'm just sitting here trying to make conversation with myself because everyone's on mute, but if you want to say hello, you can say hello. Hi, Michelle.
Hello, how are you? I just logged in early because sometimes there's a delay getting in, so I thought I'd be prepared.
Yeah, no, that's all good. So, yeah, I'm just trying to, you know, we've got a few early birds, but 6 minutes I will be kicking off right on time, and we'll run it for the hour.
Sounds good.
And so just, so is this your first time with ASBAS program?
Yeah, I've been dabbling a little bit. So I'm with Small Business Financial Counselling Service. So we offer assistance to a range of small businesses all across southern Queensland. So this is me fact finding and just getting a bit more information, as well as the fact that I am also a small business owner. So two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is just starting to find out about what ASBAS does and things that they offer.
Yeah. Yeah, so, well, you're, there's, yeah, I've been in the grant sort of era, arena, probably for a good, I'm just trying to think back, since 90s, probably.
Oh, wow, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're talking a long period of time because I was in government, so providing funding, and also on the middle part, working for agencies, assisting community groups, economic development and business groups to assist with their projects. So there's a bit of project development involved in that too. And then so that sort of went for, yeah, so I've been on all sides, plus myself, plus helping other businesses, and so, you know, from a wide range of different opportunities for funding. So it goes from business to community, so it doesn't matter. They all sort of follow the same format, the same formula.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go through some key things just to give people a bit of confidence. And so, yeah, it'll be fun today. I always like talking about it because it's an easy subject. I do this last week, and every time someone has a grant, it's, oh, good, I sure know what to do. And I'm like, okay. So I just said, oh, and in my mind, because having done it a lot of times, it's sort of, okay, this is what we do.
Yeah.
And it's something that we all, yeah, it's just something that I've a lot of experience amassed over a lot of years, talking with a lot of people in the government sector, the funding bodies, being on both sides of the fence kind of has a lot of different experiences. And sometimes you don't often no one project is the same sometimes, depending on, you know, the different funding source that you're looking at. So sometimes I've had surprises, and sometimes I've had, oh, that should have got funded, but it didn't, and why didn't it? And so we then start going through a process of time.
Yeah, I've been in some groups that have applied for community funding for projects as well, and sometimes the wording of the grant sort of throws us into a spin as to whether our project fits in under that scope of what they're funding. So that's sort of been a bit tricky at times. But anyway, we get there.
Well, it's quite often people in business are usually sitting on boards of non-profits as well.
Yeah.
And whether it's a school PNC or whether it's a community club, They usually look for people who've got business skills to be on the board. And it's sort of another labour of love that we end up doing, and sometimes it becomes a, why did I do this?
Yeah, you're not wrong.
So so we have a few people. They're starting to pop in. So
that's good. I'll put myself back on mute then.
Yeah, so 2 minutes I'll kick off and I'll get started. And
that's good.
More coffee injection. So everyone's got their tea and coffee ready, and water or whatever you need.
Made it.
I'm hearing voices. Who am I hearing? Okay, I'm just about to kick off in 1 minute. If everybody could please mute their Okay, it's 11 o'clock and I'm going to start the session. So today the topic is grants made easy. So why, I guess we always have to start with why we're applying for a grant. And quite often, as I was having a little bit of conversation earlier, sometimes because there's funding available and we find that there's a lot of sources all over the internet saying there's lots of funding available. And it's also because other people get grants all the time and you wonder, well, how come they seem to get grants and I don't? And sometimes we look inside our businesses and it's how do we get to the next level? So we understand that there might be some grants available. And it could be that there are funds available to help solve a problem within the business or a barrier to growth. So how do we access that grant funding to help us to get to the next level and to solve this problem that's blocking us entry into a market for a particular product or service? And to start a business, generally there's not a lot of funding for starting a business. However, there are programs to help businesses to start and they're government funded. And so there are some funding available for those types of activities, but that would be more towards business planning. And again, to receive assistance if you're looking to get specialist help or equipment. And so there are some entrepreneurial grants where it's a dollar for dollar type arrangement where you can get some specialist help, or if there is something like a growth fund that can help with purchasing of a vital piece of equipment to help grow a business. Or you may have received an email about new grant opportunities. So before I jump onto the next screen though, I just want to always just make sure that, you know, we're dealing with the federal government program, which is the ASBAS program, which is kindly, it's through the Australian government, through the Australian Small Business Advisory Services. Originally, this was purely for digital solutions to help people to improve in digital business. However, due to COVID, we've been lucky enough to attain some next level services to help with general business advisory, and quite often in business owners' mind as well, how can we apply for a grant? And I've had a lot of, I've been assisting probably about, or at least a couple of thousand businesses over the last 10 years, one-on-one, through, whether it's through Small Business Solutions, through TAFE, through Enterprise Centre activities, through previous ASBAS programs. And quite often, a lot of the issue that I've been finding is that there's a lot of government grant websites that say, oh, we help people with grants. And before they even find out about it, they've been charged $500 or $250 and have had people calling them saying, we can help you find a grant. And usually they always ended up on my doorstep because I've been a source for them to get grant funding. So generally you will find everything through a government website. But before we even start on talking about where to source funding, every time I talk with a group, whether it's a non-profit, whether it's a for-profit, whether it's a small business, we have to start setting and articulating your own intention of what you want to achieve. So for everybody who is looking for some type of funding, and even if you're putting a business plan together and trying to put a business action plan together, you should have some type of wish list of all the things that you need in order for you to achieve what you're wanting to do. So, for example, if you were wanting to start a wood chipping business, you might need to get a wood chipper, and so therefore you need the equipment to do that. So you know that you would need to probably get some equipment finance to do that in order to achieve that. For a business funding program, recently there was the adaptation grants that were issued by the state government, and that had a specific list of eligible items that you could apply for. And those sort of items would have been to assist with helping to improve your digital marketing of your business, trying to help you to get out of COVID. So whether it's to cover for expenses to get you over the COVID period of closures and restrictions, at that time, that was probably more a triage type funding. However, in the long term of it, I have worked with clients who have gone for growth funding and needed a particular piece of equipment so that they could grow their business and expand and diversify within the business. So it's depending on what you want. If you know there's a specific item and that's going to help you diversify or grow your business, then it's knowing exactly what you want, even just going and getting the quotes and finding out if this is exactly what you need. And even for the point of, I've had businesses come through a lot of innovation projects and they've had crowdfunding. And sometimes people can get together and say, look, we need funding to get a patent, we need to get prototype, we need to get tooling up. There's a whole heap of wish list items that need to happen. So you need to cost those out properly, because once, and I've seen this with even crowdfunded projects, they haven't put the bar high enough and then they end up running short on their budgets. So whether it's, as I said, non-profit or for-profit, you need to be accurate with your wish lists and have it fairly well costed out exactly how much you need. And this goes back to years ago when I got funding for a particular project and I was working for a non-profit and they needed a skills centre funding grant. And, oh yes, it's not going to cost much more to put 2 meters on this mezzanine floor. And I said, well, I don't know if that's going to be right or wrong, but the funding that we get is going to be the limit of what we get. And they thought, oh, no, we'll be right. And then the funding came through and then it was requoted. And it's like, well, sorry, can't do anything about that, because it's what you put down as how much you're looking for the funding is what you will get. So you need to be fairly specific about what you're needing and what is the intention or the idea of what you're trying to get the funding for. So what happens when you start going through getting funded? So having been on both sides of the fence and also speaking with government grants people within the department, a lot of the time they say, oh, we couldn't find you on internet. We couldn't find you on Facebook, or we saw you on LinkedIn, or we didn't see you. And so this is where, are you searchable to a degree that they can do a certain amount of due diligence that reflects what exactly it is that your business does or your organisation. So they do like to rely on dealing with the person who is representing the business. So if you have a good LinkedIn profile, this may be something where you might want to get some assistance through your social media or digital marketing program through ASBAS, but it's about having a really good profile that helps you to be searchable, or a good website that people can search you on. So core competence of the business, your strengths and capability. Depending on the application that you're applying for, if it's an innovation project, then having a board or advisory committee or a group of stakeholders within the business, where you have your accountant, you may have a legal representative, you may have managers with certain skills, it could be engineers, it could be HR, it could be a range of things. It's about understanding what strengths you have within your business or your organisation, and the history with what you've been doing and the fit with the funding you're applying for. So if you're applying for funding, hypothetically, for a piece of engineering equipment, and you've been running a food manufacturing business, and you have machinery that you require for your machinery, for your plant, then that shows that if you've been operating a food manufacturing plant for 10 years and you're wanting to get funding for that, that has a certain amount of history and fit with what you are applying for. So again, there's always the need or gap that you need to be considering when applying for funding. So no different if you were going out for marketing a product to your to the audience that you're trying to sell your products to. It's no different for the government, because they have to, in some types of funding, you need to be filling a gap either for them, or you need to be filling a gap within your business where you haven't got the funding for it that will be required in order for you to have a successful outcome for your project or business outcome. And again, it's about the outcomes that meeting the guidelines and the funding priorities. So in every application, it'll tell you, you need to read the request for tender. And so that tender document will tell you what the guidelines are, what the selection criteria is, and what outcomes that they're trying to get from that funding program that they've just put on. And so these are all the things about knowing exactly what you're trying to apply for, and where you're wanting to see this go into the future for your business, and how you can articulate yourself, your reputation, and also your history, and the fit for where you have been and where you're wanting to get to. So there are plenty of free resources, and knowing that the ASBAS program is across Queensland, Western Australia and Northern Territory, I've just listed a few of the sites that you can go to. Grants.gov.au. Anything with a .gov.au is safe. Anything that's a .com.au is likely to be send you off to the free services. And I'm not trying to put down other grant services. If there are grant support services out there and can offer a service to people, this is a great thing. But to identify where the grants are first, we had a particular situation where I'd been involved with a multi-agency approach, and we were running grant sessions across the community probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And there was a spate of people who had calling themselves government grants, and they were selling people, oh, you pay $500 and we'll tell you what grants are available. The fact is, if there are government grants available, there are websites throughout the government that will tell you what grants there are. And if you look up various departments, for example, the federal government, grants.gov.au, Queensland government. There's other places like Advanced Queensland where you can go to and subscribe. If the funding has closed, you can still subscribe and they will send you updates as to when the next grant opportunity will occur. And getting on those newsletter lists and subscribing to them. Local government, they will also have grants and funding that you can go through, and it's even just going through every couple of weeks and just seeing if there's any grants, and just look up the local government, look up the state government, look up the federal government in your state, and to see you can subscribe also and get alerts through, I know through the Australian government, through the Oz tender, they advertise quite a lot of their grants. Also business.gov.au have a great amount of grants and programs available. So, and I know through the Queensland government, again, there's different grants, and having a look at local government, they had certain funding for retailers who wanted to update their premises. There was a certain amount of small funding available for small business that comes up from time to time. Local government will mostly have a lot of community grant funding, but from time to time they will have initiatives for business. And sometimes it could be for local trader groups that they've had funding in the past for having security within an area to help local businesses to have CCTV and linking up with different services to help with their businesses. So the grants are there for a lot of different situations, and it could be for business groups, it could be for businesses on their own, it could be for innovators, it could be for businesses wanting to step up from one level to grow to the next level. There are business grants for at least that say that you have to have at least $1 million turnover. There are some that don't require a turnover. There are some that require a dollar for dollar funding. This year, however, well, this previous year, there's been a lot of funding with it that hasn't required a co-contribution. But again, it's about subscribing and going and being conscious to look through and see what's available. If anyone has any questions as I'm going through this, please feel free. I am trying to cram a lot within a short period of time, but I'm open to anybody who might have a question along the way, so feel free. So again, I've always had a philosophy, and you know, businesses and also community groups have always come to me and says, oh, we've never had any luck with funding in the past, and oh, we've always had a roadblock when it comes to getting funding. And I always sort of have always said, look, if you're persistent, and we'll just keep trying, because the more you try, you get better at it. It's never usually a case of if or if, it's usually a case of when, because it's only a matter of time that, you know, whether it's a small amount of funding or any funding, you educate yourself on the way of getting exposed to writing your own grant applications. Because quite often, and again, it's that apply. You need to ask for feedback. If at first you don't succeed, you try and you try again. And after how many years of trying and trying again, I can tell you that, you know, I don't win every application for funding. And there are some applications where I've been through where even people I know who've been highly skilled in government have assisted people to try and get funding, especially in state government innovation grant funding, for example, and they are highly skilled, and still sometimes we just are not able to get things funded. However, we have to keep, because goalposts can sometimes change. The ministers or department heads might say, look, we've had enough of those type of projects. We'd like to see more of these type of projects, or we're supporting more digital projects as opposed to more physical projects. So it depends on what's the flavour of the month. So relying on funding is always is something it's very difficult to sort of build a business based on relying on funding. However, it's a bonus when you get it. But you can't always say, well, look, I want funding for this and expect that you're going to get the funding for what you asked for, because it'll be what the government decides the funding application is for. I used to work on a program, and it was more of a discretionary funding program, and quite often you have to massage the project to fit within the guidelines, and the guidelines will say something and you say, well, but I want this thing, but the guidelines will tell you, no, we will fund these things, these eligible items we will fund. But you're saying, but no, I want these things, but and everything else sounds right. It fits within the objectives and it fits within what I'd like to get funded, but it doesn't fit within the eligible items. So sometimes this is why I say you write a wish list, because some of the things you may be able to fund yourself, and the other things that might be eligible items could get funded through the program. So again, it's on a case-by-case basis. It depends what the funding is that you're asking, and it depends what it is that you're requiring. So again, responding to the grant questions, the first thing I do, and I do this very, very consciously, is read the guidelines is the most important thing. And I always put down the closing date as the first thing, and I write it all over it, because at least then I know what I have to work towards. And if at all possible, try to download a PDF version of the application form before you start working on applying for the funds, because you'll find when you read the guidelines and when you actually start getting into applying for the funds, you'll realise, oh, I need that. And that might be a body of work that you may not have prepared for. So getting in early to try and get in through the application form is something that I try to do first up, so I know, because it says, oh, we just need these things, and the next thing you know, oh, they need a project plan, they need they need a business plan, they need evidence of proof of market, or they need evidence of this, or they need letters of support. There's all sorts of different things that it asks for, and then you need to have, or they might want a letter from the accountant, they might want your previous ASBAS statement, they might want your previous financials for the last 2 years. So being up to date with your financials and having a good relationship with your accountant can be beneficial on some programs, but it depends on what you're requiring. So that's why I start with the guidelines, and I put the closing date up first. Recently, again, with the adaptation grants that were out for small business last year, if any of you are in the regions, there's still some funding available, and there may still be, at last count when I looked about 2 days ago, there was still about 4% left available for the Queensland adaptation grants. I'm not certain what's happening in the other states. However, when the metropolitan adaptation grants came through under COVID-19 and small businesses.
Hey, Carrie, how are you?
Can someone mute?
I'm good.
Sorry, someone's not muted.
You're probably catching your breath after a whirlwind week, I imagine.
Hello, someone's not muted.
Yeah, I just thought I'd check in and see, how everything's going for Gemma. And I never saw.
Thank you. So now that we've got back with ourselves, so make sure that what you're applying for are eligible items. And again, as I mentioned before about the previous project, don't be afraid. So if they say there's a $10,000 limit, apply for that limit. The government, if they haven't got enough money, they'll come back to you and ask if you want to reduce that amount. And quite often, if there is a bit of a strain on the budget, but they really want to pay for that item, they will come back to you. So don't be afraid to ask for more. A lot of people I've heard them say, oh, well, I shouldn't apply for the whole month because it might be being greedy. it's not a case of being greedy. There is a bucket of money and there is a total amount to share, and it's first in, best dressed, and whoever has met the selection criteria and put the best case story forward. As it was with the adaptation grants, it was a first in, best dressed, and that was subscribed within about 3 days. That total fund just disappeared because a lot of accountants were onto it and a lot of their clients were onto it. And so sometimes it depends on the network that you're involved in to get that information quickly when those sorts of funding opportunities arise. But because it's COVID-19, that was a one-off. I don't know that we're going to have that opportunity again. So think about how you're going to deliver on the objectives of the program and what are the actions or items that will be needed to deliver. So for example, it's an innovation project. What are you going to have to do? So you might have to get some prototype work done. You might have to go and get some patent work done. You need some proof of market activities that may need to be done. You may need to, when the travel restrictions are lifted, to go and do some visitation with potential clients in other locations. So again, it's about listing all the items that need to occur. So again, it comes back to the wish list and how you're going to roll it out like a project plan. And it is a project, and that has to have some sort of, well, it has to have deliverables to achieve the outcome that you're trying to achieve. And in relation to the government department that you are applying for, it'll be what's in it for them and how will you become a great case study for their funding. So quite often, the department that gives out the funding, they like to know, oh, well, would you be happy to contribute to the program? And being a case study, it's not just about you and it's not about showing off how something has helped you, but it also helps keep those programs alive for other businesses and other organisations. So case studies are very important. And I always remember this from a conversation I had with and it was somebody who worked in the government, and they said, look, I collect these case studies, I report them back to Canberra or to the department, and the more of these that they have, and the more case studies and the more launches that they have for these types of things, it keeps the interest by government and by the politicians to keep these programs alive. So saying providing feedback is a valuable tool, not just for you, but it's also for the people who are providing the funding as well. So answering the questions, the project needs to be able to meet the objectives of the program. So for example, if we think of the export market development grants, these are grants that assist businesses who are trying to develop export markets in other countries. So the objectives are so that you can get Australian-made products and export these to other locations. So the objectives would include that you have got a bit of a market here, but you'd like to access other markets. So quite simply, you just need to articulate that in how you respond to the question. If you're unsure, an example would be the Advanced Queensland had there's funding for innovation funding. So whether it's commercialisation grants. So look at the previously funded projects, see what got funded and see if you can see a pattern. Contact the funding agency if there's a number that you can talk to somebody about it. And you'll probably find they will refer you back to the website, to the frequently asked questions. And quite often you're not, you'll get a certain amount of information, but you can ask certain little questions about things that you want to know. But in the main, they will pretty much, if you're ringing up a government department, they will refer you. They'll be as helpful as they possibly can, but it'll still always refer to the request for tender document or the grant funding document that's provided on the website. Again, as I mentioned before, try to pre-download the application, even draft or start an application, and see if you can print a PDF so you can get the information needed. Sometimes in Smarty Grants portal and in other portals you can do it. And you can go back and forth within an application. I know with the business.gov application programs, you can get copies of things and they can email you a copy of where you're at with your application. So it gives you an opportunity to go and gather that extra information that you need, and you can make contact with the departmental representative to try and help you along the way. And starting the application as soon as possible, again, to see what's missing, what you need. So if you need to go and get an attachment from an accountant to get your financials for the last 2 years, because they'll usually want your profit and loss and your balance sheet if you're putting in for, say, export grants or commercialisation grants, they will want a certain amount of your past history. So having a good relationship with your accountant, being up to date, no different if you're going for bank finance, to have all this information handy and up to date is probably one of the best things you can do if you're going for any sort of grant funding. Oops. So being prepared. Oh, I've gone fairly fast through this. So I thought I'd take a little bit longer. Hang on. Oh, yeah, so answer the question. So be prepared. So making sure that your financials are up to date, up to the recent year. History and focus on the business. So having that clearly articulated, having a really good business plan that has your, potentially a why statement or your purpose statement, mission, vision, something that, you've got a cash flow projection. You've done a little bit of research, making sure your insurance is up to date. Some of the funding requires you to have insurance. So it's about checking what is in the application to see what's needed. And that is, one of the 3 things that I generally try to do is to my closing date, try and see what I can find out, everything, what's in the application form, because what's in the application form is exactly what they want, and going through the guidelines. And sometimes there's also a deed of agreement. So downloading that also has extra information. So reading all of the documentation, it's nothing to be afraid of. It's just having, and it may seem like a boring process, but you are asking for money. So if you're going for a bank loan, or if you are going for a job, or if you are going for any type of other application process for any type of thing, the questions are fairly much standard, as the government needs to do its due diligence, because in the past, for example, years ago, they used to have funding for startup businesses, and they used to have what was called the Self-Employment Venture Scheme and the New Enterprise Incentive Scheme, where it used to be a $3,000 grant for startup businesses so they could get their businesses started. And unfortunately, many, many years ago, and we're talking 15, 20 years ago, that funding was scrapped. And unfortunately, because people abused the program and some people didn't use it the right way, so therefore government did not want to be embarrassed by having a situation of having a program that could be under scrutiny. And even in the days when I used to be facilitating a lot with government funding, it was always in the old days, the hinge test. So what would you be up for if you ended up on a current affairs show? So government is always wanting to make sure that they really want to help businesses to achieve. They really want a good story, and they really want to make sure that it fits within their guidelines and it's a good success story. and it helps the business because most of the people who are funding these and the people working within the departments have a genuine desire to want people to have some positive outcomes, and they feel as though they're getting satisfaction in the work that they do. I'm going to talk a little bit about export market development grants. And this is one type of funding. You can go to a agent to do this for you, or you can do this yourself. And this is run through Austrade. So with the export market development, for example, you cannot apply for the funding for 2 years after you start trying to export a product overseas. So in the process, though, you should be keeping records, for example, of your flight itineraries, your and having your flight passes, boarding passes. And I know this is not a time to be talking about this type of thing whilst we're not able to travel. However, those who have travelled pre-COVID or looking to travel in the future, these are the types of things that they will be looking for: a diary of your meeting schedules, in what countries, who you met, on what days, and this gets amassed for your first application for going for an EMDG grant. So in this case, you may not be eligible for money today. However, in 2 years' time, you are building a market and you're trying to get products overseas. So having your records, if you're paying for a marketing person on the ground overseas, keeping all these receipts, making sure you have all that information, and just keeping that all separate. So when the time comes that you do need to lodge an application for that, be mindful of when the opening dates are and the closing dates are. And there are closing dates if you want to lodge your export market development grant, for example, for you as a business owner, or if you have an agent, they have an extended time in order to lodge those applications for you. Through AusIndustry, there are certain funding opportunities available for commercialisation funding, and those will require an expression of interest in order to get access to that funding. So it's a matter of just putting in a bit of a story about what you're trying to achieve for your project. You'd like to grow your business. And a lot of the time, what government is looking for is some type of job creation type activity. How you're going to retain jobs, how you're going to increase jobs, how you're going to increase exports. These are typical things that a government funding body will want to have some security in knowing that that you're trying to apply for funds to help them achieve better outcomes for Australia, and also not only just for your business, but for our commercial activity as a country. When it comes to innovation, they like to see some sort of proof of market so that you can demonstrate that you have researched the market, you've sold products on the market, or you have a proof of concept. And that goes with innovation grants. And being able to have some sort of slide deck or demonstration available within that funding application, because a lot of those innovation or commercialisation grants want to have a slide deck or a video of what you're trying to achieve. No different than if you're going to go for crowdfunding. It's a very similar process. And again, through the ASBAS program, certain things that you can get through some of the other specialists within the ASBAS program to get perhaps assistance with how you might do your copywriting or your content creation for your LinkedIn profile, your website, to clearly articulate what your business is all about. Because when the funding body will try to do their due diligence on your company, they will do their research. And so having a Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn presence is an item of necessity more these days, because we are more exposed on online. years and years ago, when we only had the yellow pages, you could pretty much get away with the document and provide that information. Now, government bodies now know that everything's online, so they will do their research to see, and also whether you're registered as a business. Everything is searchable these days. So ensuring that you have all your information up to date is probably good business, as well as good for being prepared for getting grant funding. And sometimes being a member of an industry association or something similar, for example, if there's a lot of people getting engaged in the National Disability Scheme, and so they join the scheme, and there's a process for getting involved in that. Similarly, like in any aged care or health, it's becoming involved in those industries. Sometimes in a different industry group, they might provide you funding. Again, it's subscribing. And earlier I talked about having, there are different funding opportunities available through local, state and federal government. And everybody who lives in a local area, you will have a local member, you will have a state member of parliament, and you'll have a federal member. And if you subscribe to those different local, state or federal members, they will send you their own grant information updates as well. And they tell you what's coming up in local, state and federal government. So again, subscribing to the different government departments through your local, state or federal member, or being a member of an industry association. So if you're, say, for example, with the food industry, there are a couple of different organisations that, you know, there's FIAL, which is the food industry group. They are a different group. Like I think there was, there's an Auswide or some type. There's a food body. There's different construction industry. They will advise what type of opportunities there are from time to time. So being a member of a Chamber of Commerce as well, they will also advise if there's any funding opportunities available. Australian Industry Group. There's a whole wide range of industry associations available that if you, and quite often your accountant, if you have an accountant, will also advise and send out their own newsletters, keeping you up to date as and when some particular funding opportunities arise, as we did with adaptation. And in earlier years, there were other different funding grants, Jobs Assist and a whole heap of other. So grants don't just make up for exporting and equipment. It's also worthwhile looking into training as well, because there are quite a range of subsidies available that businesses can get when hiring new employees. And so that's another area of where you can look at that helps improve your cash flow situation. So there are different departments. There's new apprenticeship centres that you can get in touch with, and research online to see what wage subsidies or traineeship or apprenticeship subsidies are available. A lot of the funded government funded agencies will advise if there's any incentives available, as well as different training organisations. So there's more than one way to achieve having some type of funding or relief for a business. And again, it's about making sure that you have all the information that you require, and just making sure that you can promote yourself, promote your ideas in the best possible light. So we've got about 15 minutes left. I have run through quite a lot, and I just go through quite a few of experiences, but if anyone has any questions, please unmute yourself, let be known, and I'm happy to talk to you about any challenges or any questions that you may have, if anyone would like to have a chat.
Hi, Alice. Nicole from Hot and Healthy Global.
Yes.
We have an academy that provides affordable coaching and training for women in small business. How would we find out about grants that are specifically targeted towards supporting women?
Okay. Now, I've noticed there's a couple of grants for an organisation like yourself, and if you go to AusTender, you might be able to find, and business.gov, there's a couple of programs that are out for people who are assisting women, and I've just noticed this the other day. So you can have a look online, and I get these updates from Grant Connect always sent to me, and I know, basically what's happening. So it's through the AusTender website. You can subscribe to that website, and it will send you updates on that. So that might be something you may want to have a look at, because there's a few different funding programs out for organisations or businesses who are helping women in business. So that might be something that might be of use to you. So
Great, thank you very much.
yeah, so I hope that helps you. Is
Yes,
that the
it did.
question answered? Yeah.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yeah, so have a look at AusTender. Also, have a look, because tendering and grants are two different things. Like, they're still the same, but they're kind of different. So grants are sort of more, and even with the film industry, I'm working currently on a film project, and even when you look at the film finance, you can be looking at a certain amount will be grant funding, a certain amount will be a loan. So it all depends on the actual funding body on how they're doing it. So, so tenders, again, just get the RFT, the request for tender documents, and get on their email list, because quite often when you do put in for request for tender, they will have sometimes an information session, and people will ask questions about, well, what if my project does this, or what if my project does that? And then they update the frequently asked questions, and you can contact the contact person involved in that grant, the grants officer dealing with that particular program. So that's just something to be to sort of look into as well when you're doing that type of a funding application. So any other questions? Any other questions? So again, I've just put in there, if you have a particular grant funding or something you just want to just run past at any time, feel free, because quite often each different grant or funding opportunity has their own idiosyncrasy. And again, I've probably got roughly at least 25 years in working on the three sides of the fence. So one in the government, one as the person in the middle between government and associations, businesses, whatnot, and also as an applicant for my own companies as well. So I sort of have, worked on, again, through all different sides, and in the non-profit space, the for-profit space, and so exporting innovations, whatever. So if it's something I can't answer, I can always point you to a source to help you with that. Again, it's about persistence. So I always retain a level of positivity when I'm going through funding, because I always believe, well, some things you look at and clearly that's just not what our business is, that's not what we do. So you just ditch that, because there's so many different grant funding opportunities available. So, and I also, some of the different government bodies too, for example, and this comes into the tendering space, but you can go into Queensland government and to local government, and there are opportunities there to become part of their procurement. And sorry if I've got a bit of background noise. It's we are doing these things from home offices. So yeah, so again, persistence always pays off. And I think, you know, I'm happy to say that, you know, I've helped with millions of dollars of funding for lots of different situations, people, organisations, and it's always a buzz when you get a grant funding application through and you can see that it's made a difference, whether it's for a business or whether it's for a community. So there is a lot of satisfaction, and it also, the case studies are important, not only for promoting your business, because if you do get funded and you've had some successful outcomes, you can use that to not only promote the program, but if your business has grown, there's also a lot of different business awards you can apply for, and recognising where you've had assistance from, it keeps you in good stead with the funding bodies, but also with the government, and it helps to build your reputation for your business, particularly when you have had some funding in the past. That is always something that helps boost not only your business because it needs it, but it's also helps you to market your business and show credibility as well. Does anyone have any other further questions? We've got 10 minutes. I probably talked too fast. So I'm just looking back on my notes.
Hi, Alice. It's Michelle again.
Yes.
The resources list that you had up before, do you have any preferences as to which one's more up to date than any of the others? I've just found a couple of times I've gone looking for grants and you go in there and a lot of them are actually closed, but they're still coming up on the list, but they may have already closed months ago or even the year before. You got suggestions for which one's more up to date than any others?
Well, that's usually, so if you go to a grants website, for example, you will find that it's closed. And you'll find a lot of them are closed at the moment because of COVID, because they've had a lot of the different COVID response grants. However, there's usually somewhere on that website that says subscribe. And so you want to subscribe to that particular business.gov.au, qld.gov.au, grants, AusTender, all of those, they may be closed. Advanced Queensland, they will be closed, but they say, well, it's closed now, but you can subscribe to the newsletter, get those newsletters, and even just always check your junk mail, because it's quite often, sometimes the grant will come, and if it's gone to your junk mail, you may not have noticed it come through. That's what I'm saying. The importance of subscribing to different places is helpful. So when it's closed, doesn't mean that it's closed forever, unless in some cases, like I was working on a AusAid project with an Indonesian group, and again, because of COVID, everything's been put on hold. So, you know, this is where we have situations where you might be able to have something that you might like to apply for, and it is closed, but don't, you know, keep looking back on those sites or subscribing to those sites, because the government sites don't close. The funding may be closed. They may release something new, but if you subscribe to them, they'll send you media releases. It might be a bit annoying, but you may find out that, oh, this is the one that I've been looking for, and that will normally come through your inbox. And check your junk mail, because sometimes it may go there. Does that help?
Yeah, no, that's good, because I've done a bit of trawling before for other organisations, and you go and find one that is appropriate to find out that it closed a couple of months ago, and it'll say not taking new applications, but there's no details on when they may take new applications. So yeah, that'll be the way to go. Get on their newsletter system.
And yeah, so that's the best way. And sometimes, again, it's those industry associations. They might be a little bit, put you on so many different things, but then they'll say, oh, there's some funding that's come out now, and you're thinking, oh, I was interested in that. Or there might be a new fund that has come out, because at different times, a government, you know, because the process is policy will advise, you know, they'll do a body of work around putting together a grant program, and then they release it. But then again, obviously, you know, we're all living in this COVID environment, so we've had a little bit of a disruption in that area. So, but it doesn't mean to say that those programs aren't going to be reviving again. It just means that the people that were working, because quite often there are people who work in the background that have to do all the assessment work. So they would have had to have been pulled off one area to go and work in another area. And that's why there's only a certain amount of people that can go and work on these things in the background. And that's quite often what happens. And sometimes too, and this is a very big and an important thing, the person who's going to be assessing the grant will probably know nothing about what that grant is about. So putting acronyms and expecting that they may understand what you're talking about sometimes requires a little bit of expansion on what you're talking about, as if you're talking to somebody who does not know about what the grant is about, because they'll only have the guidelines that they're looking at when they're assessing it. And for example, in Canberra, for example, and in other places, they usually will put, you know, recent graduates from university to go and assess against what's in there. So you have to wordsmith it to the point that you are hitting on those key points where the objectives are, how you're going to meet those objectives, and also writing it in such a way that the reader may not have any experience whatsoever in your industry, in your business, in the issues within your area. They will only be clearly looking at what the guidelines are, the objectives are, and the selection criteria, and how it stands up in the strengths of how you write to that. So does that help you as well?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, so these are all the things that, you know, we find out over the years, and it's a very tricky. Sometimes you think, oh, I've nailed it, and then other times I thought I've nailed it, and then it's like, oh no. And how did that happen? And then you go back in, and you have opportunities to go back and reapply. So that's why I always say, always keep positive. So it's never a case of if, it's when. You just got to keep trying. And also with certain government departments, if you keep applying and applying, and they see that you keep applying and you keep getting feedback, generally, if you don't even get that funding, the fact that you're coming up and your name keeps coming up, it's like branding in a weird way in the grant space. And so just applying, even though you might not get it, it's not always wasted time. It's branding for the people who are on the other side of the fence. So these are just little tricks that you kind of learn along the way. And I always, you know, again, it's that persistence. And so just, you know, just as I said, anytime there's an opportunity, you want to have a 1 hour session to review an application you might be looking at. It's all confidential, obviously, because we are funded by federal government. So I'm only here to try and help you with answers. I don't necessarily need to get into the depths of your business. But if there's any places where you might have a query about something you're not sure of, I'm here to assist on that. But also, as I said before, it's about perception. So having a really good digital presence there's plenty of some really good people within this Australian Small Business Advisory Services. You can have a look at the other people who are in the group, and some may have some really good assistance available to help you with your social media, how to present yourself, how to get a good LinkedIn profile up and running, a good Facebook, how to put together a bit of a slide deck. From a visual perspective, they may have some solutions around that, and those are good things as well. So in closing, I just want to do a little bit of a plug for the program. So any type of help that you might be looking for, whether it's social media and digital marketing, online security and data privacy, websites and selling online, using small business software, there's a range of different specialists available throughout this program, and the general business advisory is relatively new, so any assistance in any type of crisis, cash flow, managing staff, retaining and staying connected to customers, resilience and well-being. Remember, we just look after ourselves, stay safe, look after each other, and do the best we can during these times, but we will get there. So I think we're very, we've had a lot of assistance in the last year, thanks to a lot of government funding that has been provided. So I think, you know, some people have missed out, and if there's anybody who is looking for help or would like to just have a talk about it, even just to see, well, why didn't it work, I'm happy to help to go through and see where it may have gone wrong, if they didn't, you know, if you can't get that information out of a government department. So yeah, so any other questions before we sign off? It's almost 12 o'clock now. So thank you very much for your interest in today's session. I hope this has provided you with some insights. These are just some insights from my experiences over this period of time. I appreciate your time today in listening to my presentation. And again, if you have any questions, I think it's 12 o'clock now. So thank you very much for your time today. If you have any suggestions, or if you'd like any other specific area in grant funding covered, I'm happy to do that. If you'd like to feed that back through to Shay, through Business Station. Thank you very much, and I will finish off now. I speak now, forever hold my peace. Thank you very much.